Imagine this: a funeral in full swing, but a dog suddenly stops everything, refusing to let go, refusing to say goodbye. Why? What secret did this loyal companion know that no one else did? Stay with us, because what you're about to hear will leave you speechless. Is it possible for love and loyalty to save a life even after death? You won't believe how this heartwarming and emotional story unfolds. Before we dive in, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more inspiring and life-changing stories. If this one moves you, make sure to like this video, share it with someone who loves animals, and leave a comment below with your thoughts. Your support means the world to us. Now, let's uncover the incredible story of a dog who refused to let death take his best friend, and the miraculous reason why. In the small town of Willow Creek, Georgia, everything was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of silence that only came with sadness. Today, the town gathered at Willow Creek Cemetery to say goodbye to Anna Williams, a bright 24-year-old college student who had passed away suddenly. Anna's mother, Margaret, stood near the casket, dabbing her eyes with a tissue. Her father, Richard, stood stiffly beside her, his hands clenched tightly. Friends and neighbors filled the space, their faces marked with grief. Anna had been loved by many. She was smart, kind, and always full of life. But now, that life had come to an end, leaving a hole in the hearts of everyone who knew her. As the minister spoke softly, offering words of comfort, a rustling sound broke the stillness. From the nearby trees, a golden retriever appeared. The dog moved slowly with purpose toward the funeral. Whispers spread through the crowd. "Whose dog is that?" someone asked. The dog, with golden fur shining in the afternoon light, walked straight to the casket. His name was Max, but no one knew him. Max was Anna's secret. For years, she had kept him hidden from her family. They didn't allow pets in the house, especially dogs. Her father thought they were a waste of time, but Anna didn't care. She had found Max as a stray puppy and raised him in secret at an old cabin outside town. To Anna, Max wasn't just a pet. He was her best friend. Now Max was here, and everyone was surprised. Richard frowned, his eyes narrowing. "Who brought that dog here?" he asked, annoyed. Margaret shook her head. "I've never seen it before." Max placed his front paws on the edge of the casket and looked inside. His big brown eyes focused on Anna, and he let out a soft, heartbreaking whine. The crowd grew quiet, watching the dog's every move. Max walked around the casket, sniffing carefully as if searching for something. Then he lay down beside it, resting his head on his paws, and stared at Anna. He wasn't leaving. Sophie, Anna's best friend, stepped forward, her heart aching. She knew about Max. Anna had told her everything. Maybe he was Anna's dog," Sophie said softly. Richard's face tightened. "Anna didn't have a dog," he said firmly. "She knew we didn't allow it." But Sophie wasn't so sure. Max's presence, his sadness, and the way he stayed by the casket made it clear. He knew Anna. The minister hesitated. "Shall we continue?" he asked. Richard didn't answer. He was staring at Max, unsure of what to do. Max, however, made it clear. He lay silently by Anna, refusing to leave. His loyalty was unmistakable. It felt like Max knew something no one else did. And somehow, it felt like Anna wasn't ready to say goodbye either. Max, the golden retriever lying quietly by Anna's casket, wasn't just a dog. He was something much more. He carried memories of a life that no one else knew about. Anna was 16 when she first found Max. It was a rainy afternoon in Willow Creek, and Anna had gone for a walk in the woods. She often wandered there to clear her mind. away from the pressures of school and the strict rules at home. Her father, Richard, believed life was about discipline and hard work. There was no room for pets in his house. "Pets are a waste of time," he would say. Anna never argued. But that day, the woods gave her something she couldn't ignore. A small, scared whimper reached her ears. She followed the sound until she found him. A tiny golden puppy, shivering under a fallen tree, his fur soaked from the rain. His big, frightened eyes met hers, and Anna's heart melted. "You're all alone," she whispered, gently lifting him into her arms. The puppy was cold and trembling, but he snuggled into her chest, finding warmth and safety. Anna knew she couldn't take him home. Her father wouldn't allow it. But leaving him behind wasn't an option either. She carried him to an old abandoned cabin, hidden deep in the woods. It had been her secret hideout for years. Now it became their shared secret. "I'll call you Max," she said softly, wrapping him in an old blanket she found inside. The puppy wagged his tail for the first time. From that day on, Max and Anna were inseparable. Whenever life felt too heavy, when school was tough, when friends let her down, or when home felt like a place she didn't belong, Anna would escape to the cabin. Max was always waiting for her, his tail wagging, his eyes full of unconditional love. When Anna had her first heartbreak, she cried for hours in the cabin. Max stayed by her side, resting his head on her lap, quietly offering comfort. "You're the only one who really understands me," she whispered, her fingers running through his soft fur. Max listened. He always listened, even when her parents argued, and the tension in the house felt like it might crush her. Max was her safe place. With him, she could be herself. Now, as Max lay beside Anna's casket, those memories filled the air around him. He remembered every moment they had shared. The laughter, the tears, the quiet times in the woods. Anna had been his whole world. And now, she was gone. Sophie, Anna's best friend, watched Max from a distance. She had known about him. Anna had shared stories of the loyal dog who had been her secret companion. He meant everything to her, Sophie whispered, tears filling her eyes. Richard, standing nearby, didn't share the same sentiment. He saw Max as just another stray. But Max wasn't just a stray. He was family. And even though no one knew it yet, Max had come for a reason. Something wasn't right. He wasn't ready to say goodbye. Not yet. The funeral was quiet, filled with sadness, as family and friends stood around Anna's grave, saying their final goodbyes. But there was one unexpected presence. Max, Anna's golden retriever. Max stood next to Anna's casket, acting strangely. His usually calm eyes were filled with worry, and his body was tense. Something wasn't right. When the casket was being lowered into the grave, Max suddenly howled loudly, causing everyone to stop and look. His body was stiff, and he pawed at the ground, digging at the earth, as if trying to stop them. His barking was desperate, almost pleading. Richard, Anna's father, felt irritated. "Get that dog out of here," he said, clearly annoyed. "We need to finish this." But Max didn't move. He stood right in front of the grave, blocking the workers from lowering the casket. His tail was tucked between his legs, and his eyes were full of emotion. The family started to get curious. At first, they thought it was just an outburst, but as Max continued to act this way, they began to wonder. What was going on? Why was he acting so strangely? Sophie, Anna's best friend, couldn't just stand by and watch. She had known Anna's deep connection with Max, and she believed the dog was trying to tell them something important. "Please, listen," Sophie said, stepping forward to talk to the family. "Max isn't just a dog. He was Anna's closest friend. He's trying to tell us something. We need to listen. Richard shook his head. He's just a dog. He doesn't know what's happening. But Sophie wouldn't back down. She had seen how much Anna loved Max, and she knew he was special. I know it's hard to understand, Sophie said softly, but Max knows something. Please, just let him be for a moment. Max barked again, this time even louder, almost like he was trying to get them to understand. Sophie slowly walked over to him and knelt beside him. She could see the pain in his eyes. This wasn't just a dog throwing a tantrum. This was Max, trying to communicate something important about Anna. Sophie gently patted his head. It's okay, Max. We hear you. Max turned his gaze back to the casket and let out another soft whimper. He wasn't ready to say goodbye yet. He had something to share. The workers stepped back, waiting for someone to tell them what to do. Richard stood silently, unsure of what was happening, but not willing to argue. And for a brief moment, everything seemed to pause. Max, the family, and the strange feeling that something wasn't finished yet. As Max continued to stand guard over Anna's casket, Sophie felt a sense of urgency she couldn't ignore. She remembered something Anna had once told her during a quiet afternoon at the cabin. If anything ever happens to me, Anna had said, her voice unusually serious, find the letter in the cabin. The memory hit Sophie like a wave. She didn't know exactly what Anna meant by that letter, but the urgency in her voice was undeniable. Sophie's heart raced. Could this letter have something to do with what was happening now? Without wasting another moment, Sophie turned to the family, her mind made up. I need to go to the cabin, she said firmly. It's important. There's something Anna left behind. Richard, still grieving but curious, nodded without questioning her. Sophie rushed off, Max's howls echoing in the distance as if urging her on. She drove quickly through the winding roads of the woods that led to the old cabin, where Anna and Max used to spend time together. It was hidden away, just like the love they had shared. When Sophie arrived, the familiar sight of the small, secluded cabin brought back memories of happier days. She stepped inside, the creaky wooden floorboards greeting her as she searched the rooms. It didn't take long. In a dusty drawer beneath the window, Sophie found it, a sealed envelope with Anna's handwriting on it. The words, "My family," were written on the front, but there was another note just below it. To Max. Sophie's heart skipped a beat. This wasn't just any letter. It was meant for both Anna's family and Max. With trembling hands, Sophie opened the letter, her eyes scanning the paper. The words on the page were written with love, but there was something deeper. Anna had known something. The letter read, To my family. If you are reading this, then something has happened to me. I'm sorry for the pain it may cause, but there is something you must understand. I made a choice that you may never fully understand. But please, I hope you can respect it. There is something more to my bond with Max. I know you all thought I was hiding him, but he has been my best friend, my protector, and my confidant. He knows the truth about the accident, the truth about my death. I need you to listen to Max. He knows. He'll show you the way. I'm not gone yet. Please, keep the burial site untouched for now. Love, Anna. Sophie stared at the letter, her mind racing. What accident was Anna talking about? And how could Max possibly know the truth about her death? There was only one thing to do. Return to the funeral, to Max, and to the family who had no idea what was unfolding. Sophie grabbed the letter, her heart pounding as she rushed back to the cemetery, knowing the shocking truth was about to be revealed. Sophie's hands were shaking as she clutched the letter tightly. Her mind was spinning with the information she had just uncovered. Anna had known something something that explained Max's desperate behavior at the grave. It was all starting to make sense. As Sophie read the letter again, her heart pounded harder with each line. Anna's words were clear and urgent. To my family, if you are reading this, then something has happened to me. I'm sorry for the pain it may cause, but there is something you must understand. I made a choice that you may never fully understand. But please, I hope you can respect it. I've been living with a rare medical condition. It's something that makes me appear dead. My heart stops, my breathing stops. But it's not permanent. I can come back. If I'm found in this state, there's a window of time. 48 hours, no more. That's the window for me to wake up. But once I'm buried, it's over. I will never come back. I've asked Max to watch over me. He knows what to do. He will protect me if this ever happens. Please don't bury me too soon. Don't give up on me. Not yet. Oh, love, Anna. Sophie gasped, the gravity of Anna's words hitting her all at once. A rare medical condition that could mimic death. Anna had been living with something that could trick everyone, into thinking she was gone for good. But it wasn't true. Anna had been prepared for this possibility, and she had trusted Max to protect her, to stop anyone from making a terrible mistake. Sophie's eyes filled with tears as she grabbed the letter and hurried back to the cemetery. She knew what she had to do. She couldn't let Anna's family make the mistake of burying her without knowing the truth. As she reached the cemetery, Sophie was breathless. The funeral had already been paused, the family standing in a solemn silence around the grave. Max was still there, standing by the casket, his eyes filled with emotion. Everyone, I have something important to share, Sophie said, her voice shaky but determined. She unfolded the letter and, as the family watched, began to read aloud. Anna left this letter for all of you, she began, her voice trembling with every word. It explains everything about her condition, about Max, and what we need to do next. Sophie read the letter in full, making sure every word was heard. Richard, Anna's father, stood frozen, his face a mask of confusion and disbelief. What? What is this? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. This isn't possible. But Sophie didn't stop. She had to finish. When Anna was younger, she was diagnosed with a rare medical condition. It's something that makes her heart stop, makes her seem dead. But it isn't real. She could come back if we don't give up too soon. She trusted Max to protect her. He's been guarding her all along. Richard stood there speechless. His hands were clenched into fists at his sides, but there was a hint of doubt in his eyes. Could this really be true? Could Anna be alive? Max, standing beside the casket, suddenly let out a low whimper. Sophie's heart sank. The dog's eyes were filled with something more than sadness. He seemed to know what was happening, and he was begging them to believe. Please, Sophie said, looking at Anna's family. Give her a chance. Don't bury her yet. She's not gone. A long silence hung in the air. The tension was thick, but it was clear that something had shifted. Max had been trying to tell them all along, and now the truth had come to light. Richard finally stepped forward, his eyes heavy with emotion. Are you saying my daughter could still be alive? He asked, his voice breaking. Sophie nodded, her eyes filled with tears. Yes, but we need to act quickly. We can't lose her. As the weight of the revelation settled over everyone, a glimmer of hope sparked in their hearts. The decision now lay in their hands. Could they trust Anna's letter? Could they trust Max? Max let out a soft, hopeful bark, as if to say, I'm still here, and so is she. Sophie's words hung in the air like a thunderclap, leaving everyone in stunned silence. The truth was too heavy, too horrifying to grasp all at once. Anna's family stood frozen around the open grave, each face etched with disbelief, shock, and slowly creeping guilt. Richard Williams, the stern patriarch who had enforced the strict no-pet rule in their household, was the first to speak. His voice was barely a whisper, trembling under the weight of what they had almost done. We almost buried her alive." His eyes darted to the casket, then to Max, whose golden fur was now streaked with dirt from pawing at the ground. "I didn't know. I didn't." His words faltered, swallowed by the enormity of his realization. Max, still stationed firmly by Anna's casket, let out a low, mournful whimper. His eyes, usually bright and full of life, were now glassy with emotion, as if he understood the weight of the moment better than anyone. He had been trying to tell them all along. Richard's knees buckled, and for the first time in years, the man who had always been a pillar of control and authority crumbled. He fell to the ground beside Max, tears streaming down his face. "I was wrong," Richard choked out, his hands trembling as he reached for the dog he once resented. "I was so wrong." Max didn't flinch. Instead, he leaned into Richard, offering comfort in the same way he had always comforted Anna. It was as if Max held no grudges, only love and forgiveness. Sophie, standing nearby, watched the scene unfold with tears in her eyes. She could see the pain etched on every face. Anna's mother, her younger brother, even distant relatives who had come to pay their respects. The realization that they had almost buried Anna, the vibrant young woman they all loved, was unbearable. Anna's mother, Margaret, took a hesitant step forward. Her hands covered her mouth, and her eyes were wide with fear and guilt. "Richard, what do we do now?" she asked, her voice cracking. "Is there still time?" Sophie nodded, holding up the letter again. "Anna said we have 48 hours. She trusted Max to protect her until then. We can't lose hope." The crowd, which had gathered to bid farewell, now stood in quiet reverence, watching the scene unfold. Neighbors, friends, and even the pastor who had come to lead the service were visibly moved. Max, sensing the shift in energy, stood up tall beside the casket, his tail wagging softly, as if signaling that hope was not lost. He pawed gently at the casket one more time, then looked up at Richard with pleading eyes. Richard, still kneeling, placed a hand on Max's head. "You saved her," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "You saved my daughter's life." The weight of Richard's words settled over the crowd, and for the first time, they truly saw Max, not as a pet, but as a guardian, a protector, and a symbol of unwavering loyalty. The pastor stepped forward, his voice gentle yet resolute. "We must act quickly. If there is even the slightest chance, we must give Anna that chance. Let us pray for a miracle." Max let out a soft bark, as if to say, "Believe, she's still with us." The family and friends gathered closer, their hearts heavy, but now filled with a glimmer of hope. Time was running out, but they wouldn't give up. Not now. Not after everything. Max remained by Anna's side, unwavering, as they prepared for what came next. The air around the graveyard was thick with tension. The crowd stood still, hearts pounding, breaths held. Some clutched their hands in silent prayer, while others exchanged anxious glances. Time was slipping away, and every second felt like an eternity. Richard knelt by Anna's casket, his trembling hands resting on the wooden lid. "Anna," he whispered, his voice cracking with desperation. "Please, if you can hear us, come back." Max, ever watchful, stood beside him, his golden eyes fixed on the casket. He whimpered softly, his ears twitching, as if listening for something no one else could hear. Then, without warning, Max let out a sudden sharp bark, a sound filled with urgency and hope. Everyone's eyes snapped to the casket. A faint noise echoed from within. It was subtle at first, like the soft rustling of fabric. Richard's breath caught in his throat. Did anyone else hear that? He asked, his voice barely a whisper. Sophie stepped closer, her eyes wide with anticipation. I heard it, she said, her voice trembling. Anna. The crowd edged forward, their curiosity now mingled with a spark of hope. Suddenly, a muffled thud came from inside the casket. Then another. The sound grew louder, more deliberate. Gasps rippled through the gathering as realization dawned on them. She's alive, Sophie cried out, tears streaming down her face. Anna's alive. Richard and Sophie, with trembling hands, worked quickly to open the casket. The lid creaked as it lifted, revealing Anna lying still, her face pale but serene. For a moment, everything was silent. Then, her eyelids fluttered, and she drew in a shallow, ragged breath. Anna! Margaret's voice broke with emotion as she rushed forward, falling to her knees beside the casket. Anna's eyes slowly opened, unfocused at first, then locking onto the familiar faces around her. Confusion flickered in her gaze, followed by recognition. Mom? Dad? Her voice was weak but clear, like a fragile whisper carried on the wind. Margaret sobbed with relief. Yes, sweetheart, we're here. You're safe now. Richard, overcome with emotion, clutched Anna's hand tightly. We almost lost you, he said, his voice choked with tears. But you're back. You're back. Before anyone could say another word, Max leaped into the casket, his tail wagging furiously. He licked Anna's face with uncontainable joy, his soft whimpers blending with the sobs and laughter around him. It was as if Max had been waiting for this moment, knowing all along that Anna would return. Anna weakly lifted a hand to stroke Max's fur. Max, you never gave up on me, she murmured, her eyes shining with gratitude and love. You saved me. The crowd, witnessing the emotional reunion, stood in awe. Tears streamed down the faces of family, friends, and even strangers. They had come to say goodbye, but were now witnessing a miracle, a testament to the bond between a girl and her loyal dog. The pastor, his voice filled with reverence, stepped forward. Today, we have witnessed not just the power of faith, but the extraordinary love and loyalty of this dog. Max never wavered, never lost hope. He is a reminder of the unconditional love that transcends even the boundaries of life and death. Max, still beside Anna, let out a joyful bark, as if affirming the pastor's words. He had fulfilled his mission, to protect Anna, to keep her safe, and to bring her back to the family who loved her. As Anna was gently helped out of the casket, she embraced her parents, Sophie, and finally Max. Thank you, she whispered to him, for everything. Max wagged his tail and rested his head on her lap, content. His mission was complete, but his love for Anna would never end. The crowd slowly began to disperse, each person leaving with a newfound appreciation for the bonds that tie us together, human and animal, life and love. Anna, now surrounded by those who cherished her, looked down at Max and smiled. Come on, boy, she said softly. Let's go home. And with that, Anna and Max walked away from the graveyard, side by side, toward a future filled with hope, love, and the unbreakable bond they shared. The soft hum of fluorescent lights filled the hospital room as Anna lay in bed, her frail body slowly regaining its strength. Monitors beeped rhythmically, each sound a reminder that life, fragile as it may be, had found its way back to her. Sunlight filtered through the window, casting a warm glow on her pale face. Richard sat by her side, his weathered hands clasped tightly together. His eyes, red and swollen from days of tears, remained fixed on his daughter, watching every subtle rise and fall of her chest. For years, he had been a man of rigid rules, believing that discipline and control were the keys to a good life. But now, in the quiet stillness of the hospital, he realized how much he had missed, how much love he had overlooked in his pursuit of order. "Dad!" Anna's voice, though soft, broke through his thoughts. Richard looked up, his heart tightening at the sound. "Anna," he whispered, his voice trembling with emotion. "You're awake." A weak smile played on Anna's lips. "I'm okay," she said slowly. "Where's Max?" At the mention of his name, a familiar golden head peeked through the doorway. Max, who had refused to leave the hospital's waiting area, was finally allowed in. His tail wagged furiously as he padded across the room, his nails clicking softly against the tiled floor. He reached Anna's bedside and gently rested his head on her lap, his warm eyes gazing up at her with a mix of relief and love. "Max," Anna whispered, tears welling up in her eyes. She stroked his soft fur, feeling the comforting warmth beneath her fingers. "You did it. You saved me." Richard watched the interaction in silence, his heart heavy with guilt. He had always seen Max as a nuisance, a distraction from the structured life he wanted for his family. But now, he saw the truth, the unwavering loyalty, the unconditional love that Max had shown, even when Richard had been too blind to see it. "I owe you an apology," Richard said, his voice breaking the silence. Anna and Max both turned their attention to him. "I've been wrong. About so many things. About Max. About you. About what really matters." Anna's eyes softened as she looked at her father. "Dad." Richard swallowed hard, struggling to find the right words. "I thought I was protecting you by enforcing all those rules, by keeping our lives controlled. But I see now that I was wrong. I didn't see how much Max meant to you, how much you needed him, and how much he needed you." He reached out and gently took her hand in his. "I'm so sorry, Anna. I should have listened. I should have been there for you." Tears streamed down Anna's face as she squeezed her father's hand. "I just wanted someone who understood me," she whispered. "Max, he was always there when I felt alone." "I understand now," Richard said, his voice thick with emotion. "And I promise you, things will be different. No more secrets, no more shutting out what's important. Max is part of our family now, and he always will be." Max, as if understanding every word, let out a soft, contented woof. He nuzzled closer to Anna, his tail thumping against the side of the bed. Just then the door opened, and Sophie entered, carrying a bouquet of bright sunflowers. Her face lit up with a mixture of relief and joy when she saw Anna awake. "Anna!" she exclaimed, rushing to her side. "You're okay." Anna smiled, her eyes shining with gratitude. "Thanks to Max. And you." Sophie set the flowers on the bedside table and took a seat next to Richard. "The doctors said you were incredibly lucky," she said. "They confirmed your condition. It's called catalepsy. It mimics death, but can be reversed if caught in time." Anna nodded. "I knew something was wrong. That's why I wrote the letter, just in case." "And thank God you did," Sophie said, her voice full of emotion. "Max knew. He knew something was wrong and refused to let anyone bury you. He saved your life, Anna." Richard glanced at Sophie, his expression somber. "We almost made the worst mistake of our lives," he admitted. "But Max, he didn't give up." Anna reached out to pet Max again, her fingers tracing the soft fur behind his ears. "He never gave up on me," she said softly. "Not once." Margaret entered the room quietly, carrying a tray of water and medicine. Her eyes were red from crying, but there was a gentle smile on her face. "We've all learned something from this," she said, placing the tray on the table. "Max reminded us what it means to truly love and to never lose hope." Richard nodded. "From now on, Max will never be kept away. He's part of this family, a family that almost made a terrible mistake, but one that will never forget the lesson we've learned." Max, hearing his name, let out a joyful bark, wagging his tail as if to say, "I'm home, and I'll always be here." Days passed, and Anna grew stronger with each one. The hospital released her, and the family returned home. This time, with Max walking proudly beside them, no longer a secret, but a celebrated member of the family. Richard, true to his word, began to change. He spent more time with Anna, listening to her, understanding her dreams and fears. He even joined her and Max on walks through the park, watching in awe as the dog who once annoyed him now filled his heart with gratitude and love. Neighbors who had once gossiped about the strict Williams household noticed the change. They saw a family that had been given a second chance, one that now valued love, loyalty, and the bonds that made life worth living. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Anna sat on the porch with Max by her side. Richard joined them, carrying a cup of tea. "Beautiful evening," he said, sitting down beside her. Anna nodded, her hand resting on Max's head. "It is." Richard took a sip of his tea and looked at Max. "You know," he said, his voice thoughtful, "I used to think that love was something you could control. But now I realize it's something you give, without expecting anything in return." Max looked up at Richard, his eyes full of understanding. He wagged his tail, as if agreeing with the newfound wisdom. Anna smiled, leaning her head against her father's shoulder. "Love is what saved me," she said softly. "Max's love, and now our families." And as the stars began to twinkle in the night sky, the Williams family sat together, knowing that their lives had been forever changed by the unwavering love of a loyal dog named Max. The seasons had shifted, and the once vibrant green trees of Georgia had turned to shades of amber and gold. A gentle autumn breeze swept through the quiet cemetery, carrying with it the faint scent of fallen leaves and distant memories. Anna walked slowly along the stone path, her steps light but purposeful. Max trotted beside her, his golden fur gleaming in the soft sunlight, tail wagging gently with every step. It had been months since that fateful day when Max saved her from being buried alive, and life had gradually settled back into a peaceful rhythm. Her health had improved, and the bond between her and Max had only grown stronger. He was no longer just her secret companion. He was her hero, her family, and her unwavering source of comfort. Anna carried a bouquet of fresh flowers in her hands, a mix of sunflowers and lilies, symbols of life and remembrance. She stopped at a small, unmarked grave near the edge of the cemetery, a resting place for someone who had passed long ago, forgotten by most, but remembered today by Anna. She knelt down, placing the flowers gently on the grave, her fingers brushing against the cold stone. Max sat beside her, his warm eyes watching her every move. He seemed to understand the solemnity of the moment, his usual playful energy replaced by a calm, almost reverent stillness. Anna took a deep breath, the crisp autumn air filling her lungs. "We've come a long way, haven't we, Max?" she said softly, her voice carrying a mix of gratitude and reflection. "You've always been there for me, even when no one else knew." Max tilted his head, as if listening intently, his eyes never leaving her face. Anna smiled and reached out to stroke his fur, her hand moving gently over the golden strands. When I found you in the woods all those years ago, I thought I was rescuing you. But it turns out you were the one who saved me." Max let out a soft, contented woof, his tail wagging ever so slightly. She looked up at the sky, where clouds drifted lazily across a canvas of blue. "Life is fragile," she continued. "I almost lost mine because of something none of us could control. But love is what brought me back. Your love." Her voice trembled slightly, the weight of her emotions evident. "You saved me because you loved me. Love always finds a way." Max leaned into her touch, his eyes reflecting a depth of understanding that went beyond words. He had been her protector, her guardian, and in many ways, her guiding light through the darkest moments. As they sat in the quiet of the cemetery, surrounded by the memories of lives once lived, Anna reflected on the lessons she had learned. Life wasn't just about the big moments. It was about the small, quiet acts of love and loyalty that carried us through. Max had taught her that. He had shown her that sometimes the greatest heroes aren't the ones who make grand gestures, but the ones who stay by our side, refusing to let us go when we need them the most. A gentle breeze rustled the leaves around them, and Anna felt a sense of peace wash over her. She stood up slowly, brushing the dirt from her knees, and looked down at Max. "Come on, boy," she said with a smile. "It's time to go home." Max stood and gave one last look at the grave before following Anna back down the path. His steps were steady, his head held high, as if he knew his mission was far from over. He would always be there for her, just as she had always been there for him. As they walked away, the sun began to set, casting a warm golden light over the cemetery. In that moment, it was clear that their story wasn't just about survival. It was about the power of love, loyalty, and the unbreakable bond between a girl and her dog. The final words echoed softly in Anna's mind as they left the cemetery. Sometimes it's not human hands that hold us back from the edge of death. It's the pause of a loyal friend who refuses to let us go. And with Max by her side, Anna knew that she had been given a second chance at life, a chance to love, to live, and to cherish every moment, knowing that the greatest gift of all was the love of a loyal friend who never gave up on her. Wow, what an incredible journey of love, loyalty, and the bond between a pet and their owner. If this story touched your heart, remember, sometimes love truly knows no boundaries. Just like Max, there are stories all around us of devotion that can move mountains. If you want to see more amazing and emotional stories, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and click the bell so you never miss a moment of heartwarming content. Share your thoughts with us in the comments below. We love hearing from you. And if you know someone who needs to hear this story, be sure to share this video with them. Thanks for watching, and remember, sometimes it's not human hands that keep us from the edge. It's the pause of a loyal friend who refuses to let go. See you in the next video.